exchange of gunfire. There were no police body cameras. There was a bad incident report. And there just here on the streets of Louisville is an overwhelming feeling that there has not been justice for Breonna Taylor, which is what has led us to this point.
Cal, we're going to keep an eye on you. Wave your arms if you have any new information or if anything on the ground changes. But I'm glad you brought us back to Breonna Taylor. The culture has adopted the rallying cry, say her name, for the very reason Cal Perry just articulated. At the center of this relatively small area geographically, but very, very hot situation politically and from a public safety standpoint, is a woman whose life was cut short. She had a brilliant future ahead of her. And we will make every effort in our coverage of whatever happens there today to say her name. Breonna Taylor, Jason Johnson, today, no one charged in her shooting.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, Nicole. I'm not surprised. And you know, every time this happens, and this has happened a lot, I always tell myself before I go on the air, I'm not going to get pissed. I'm not going to do any sort of performative tears. I'm not going to rage or anything else like that. And yet today, I can't help it. I'm so disgusted by this. I'm so disgusted by Daniel Cameron's performance. I am so sick and tired of black people going on the air and performing for violence and white supremacy and state-sponsored violence against black people and claiming their mamas and claiming they're because of black men, they care about it. This woman got shot in her house when she was asleep. It's like Atiana Jefferson got shot playing video games with her nephew at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's like Botham Jean was eating ice cream, got shot on his couch. I'm telling people, I'm sitting here in my house right now. I have an IFB in my ear. I can't hear much. So if cops busted into my house right now and shot me on the air, what Daniel Cameron basically told America is that that would be legal. If they thought that there was something wrong, I could be shot in broad daylight on national television in my house because the cops can break in and shoot whoever they want if they're concerned. That is why people are upset. That is why protesters are mad at the media, because they're tired of these discussions being teased out in ways that give justifications for nothing other than state-sponsored white supremacy and killing of black people. It is so infuriating and so maddening. And I empathize with the people who are there in pain. And I empathize with the protesters who are going to be home by 9 o'clock, Nicole. That's the thing. The Black Lives Matter protesters, they're going to take their signs and they're going to go home. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of interlopers and white nationalists and 3%ers and terrorists battling out in the street like the No Church in the Wild video. And that's how the Black Lives Matter protesters are going to get depicted. So I want to thank you, actually, for being so good in your opening by saying, hey, can we distinguish between the people wearing black and the folks protesting? Can we distinguish between the white nationalists walking around with guns and the people there who are centering Breonna Taylor? Because that's where the frustration comes from. Not just that another life was snuffed out, but that a lot of people aren't doing what you're doing, Nicole, which is distinguishing between those who are concerned about our criminal justice system and the routine murder of black people and those who want to co-opt the experience for their own political joys.
I want you to say more. Can you just keep going, but maybe pick up on this idea that if you're not safe in your house and you're not safe on the streets, WTF? I mean, where do we go from here?
Yeah. You're not safe anywhere because I can't go anywhere, Nicole. If I go jogging, I could end up like Ahmaud Arbery. You can't go anywhere if you're black. And what's so disgusting about this is, I mean, again, the 3%ers, they're a terrorist organization. And this is a chant that I heard from some of my activist friends. You know, when activists go out there and they say things like the cops and the Klan go hand in hand, people have been saying that since the 70s. The reason they say that is because you've got white nationalists walking around with guns, and the cops are fine with that. They're not pulling those people off the street. They're not pulling Rittenhouse off the street. And black people, these guys are there saying we have to protect folks. Who's the person who's afraid? It's the black people who can get shot anywhere under any circumstances and then have it justified in these horrible press conferences, which are these sort of orgies of disingenuous nonsense about the law, that it was like her own fault that she got shot in a house. And I think it's really important going forward, really, really important going forward, that if this happens to Breonna Taylor, and it happens to Atiana Jefferson, and it happens to Botham Jean, think of all the other times in America this is happening every single day, and we don't hear about it because there's no video, because there isn't a local activist organization, because there's not a good reporter on the ground. People are being murdered every single day by police who are not being held accountable. And I don't want to hear about any good cops, because if they were good cops who were concerned about this kind of behavior, they'd be out there protesting too. And we don't see enough of that. What we do see is collusion between attorney generals and police and white nationalists, so that when some black person dies, there's always a justification for it.
I want to bring David Henderson in this conversation, but I've got one more for you, Jason Johnson. We also have a president who can't or won't be briefed about the domestic terrorism threat posed by white nationalism in this country. It's been testified to by the current FBI director, Christopher Wray. It's been attested to by Elizabeth Newman, who left the Trump Homeland Security Department, where her job was to monitor threats to the homeland. And a threat to the homeland is the very element that Cal Perry just reported to be in the streets of Louisville tonight, militias.
Yeah, this is how Handmaid's Tale starts, right? Because you have these violent militias in the street, and the president is encouraging them. More police officers, when you talk about terror, more police officers have been killed by white nationalists in America than Al-Qaeda. More police officers have been killed by white nationalists in America than MI5. It is domestic white terror that is the greatest threat to our way of life, and our president has been a terrorist sympathizer. And if there was ever any doubt, all you got to do is go back to my alma mater of Charlottesville and UVA, when he said it's perfectly fine on both sides, and there were good people on both sides. That, Nicole, as you point, that is the real danger. That every single time a Daniel Cameron gets on a podium, cries crocodile tears, and claims that his mama would be concerned about him, he is sending a sign to white nationalists everywhere. With the tacit consent of the President of the United States, you can do this whenever you want, and we won't jail you. We won't hold you accountable. Shoot all the black people you want. Shoot all the protesters you want, because at the end of the day, this system is made to protect white violence. That's what we're hearing. And our president doesn't mind, because as long as they're killing people or threatening or intimidating people he doesn't like, whether that's in the form of marching through the street with protesters or trying to stop folks from voting in Virginia, which we saw with militias here just a couple hours away from where I am now, the president encourages it. And he is completely backed up by William Barr and the rest of the Republican Party.
I'm so grateful for you. Stay with us, Jason. I want to bring in to the conversation David Henderson. David, if you could take another stab at explaining these charges to me. One officer charged with firing shots into apartments other than Breonna Taylor's.
What's necessary here to understand these charges is to understand what was not explained in today's press conference. I can relate to so much of what was just said because I'm one of Atiana Jefferson's attorneys, and both Atiana Jefferson's case and Botham Jean's case happened right here in Dallas, Texas. Help people understand these problems extend well beyond Kentucky. When we discussed the issues that came up today, we kept hearing over and over again in the press conference that a prosecutor's role is to figure out what happened. That's only part of a prosecutor's role. A prosecutor's official job description is to make sure that justice is served. And at a time like this, it's important that justice is served and that the public understands how justice is being served. Unfortunately, some of our laws need to change, and the laws do limit the outcome in this situation. However, what's not being discussed is the fact that the grand jury process is a rigged process. People tend to think, oh, it's just like serving jury duty, where you go, you're there for a day, then maybe you get to go home. If you get put on a case, you might be on a case for a week or so. Grand juries tend to serve for weeks at a time, sometimes months at a time. There's a famous trial lawyer named Joe Jamel who used to give speeches, and I've heard a number of them. And when he was at the DA's office, he said that on Mondays, they used to make jokes about how the habitual felons came in on Wednesdays. And so on Wednesday, when you present a case, the grand jury knows, oh, this must be habitual felon day. In the jurisdiction where I worked at the DA's office, you had judges who baked cookies for the grand jurors. They heard from the same prosecutors every day, over and over and over again, and got to know them, got to trust them. The reason these details are important is because not only do we not see a single charge for the death of someone who was an innocent person murdered in their home. We see charges against other people that could have been used to indict someone for also shooting at Breonna Taylor. The reason that didn't happen is because these charges are orchestrated not only to make sure that the officers face minimum criminal charges, but they are also going to face minimum punishments. When these cases go to a jury, part of what the jury is going to look at is, look, the maximum punishment for recklessly shooting into someone's home is 5 years. When they look at the fact that the person was charged with shooting into the home of someone who was not killed, they're likely going to assign a low penalty or possibly even probation for that type of offense. If the jury knew, hang on a second, this conduct led to the death of one person, even if the Attorney General was very vague about whose bullets actually killed Breonna Taylor, they'll give less punishment than they would have had the officer, had the detective also been indicted for shooting that way into Breonna Taylor's home.
David Henderson, Jason Johnson, and Cal Perry, thank you so much for your candor and your insights on what is another unbelievably surreal day. I'm grateful to all of you. After